Hey everyone, this is Jules. If you don't know me yet, I'm the youth director here at Johnson, and I am here with the youth group this week, and we are here with your midweek devotion. We have Savannah and Carl and John and Joe, if you don't know them as well. And we're super excited just to be bringing a little midweek encouragement to you guys, and to even just give you a window into what we do in youth group and the way that we kind of interact together. So, our verse that we have chosen to do our devotion around is 1 Timothy 4:12. And so I'm actually going to ask Savannah to read that for us.
Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech and conduct, in love and faith and purity.
Awesome. Yeah, and so we chose that verse because as we were discussing what to talk about, that felt like something that really spoke to us. And I say us relatively as young people. And so a little background that we've been kind of learning about Timothy and that feels important to the context is that Timothy was a kind of disciple of Paul. He was underneath Paul. And so as we talked about, Paul was an apostle of Jesus. He was called upon by God to spread the gospel. And then Paul had people under him that he also delegated to. And so one of those people is Timothy. And in 1 Timothy, Paul writes this letter to Timothy, sending him out into the world, back to the church of Ephesus, to kind of correct some false teachings that had been going on in the church. So Paul writes this whole letter about what he wants Timothy to do when he goes to Ephesus to fix some of the false teachings that are going on there. And so what's the big deal behind this whole thing is that Timothy is a young dude. And he's kind of known biblically for being young. And so there's this huge task at hand that Paul delegates to Timothy as someone to go and spread the gospel, to go and correct false teaching. And so that's something that stuck out to us, as we also are, first of all, young people, but also called upon by God to go and spread the gospel, to go and correct false teachings, to go out into the world. And so this verse spoke to us in a way that was relatable and encouraging. And so we just wanted to share some of the ways that as young people, we have led in the ways that Savannah mentioned, in speech and conduct and love and faith and in purity. So I'm going to throw it over to Joe with his example of how he, as a young person, has led in love or faith, whatever you want to come.
Yeah, okay, so mine is, I guess, about like a time when I felt like God really spoke to me. I was going through a pretty difficult time, and things just weren't going the way that I wanted. Was pretty depressed, and during that time, I kind of sensed God telling me how to handle the situation. So I decided to read the Bible some, to see like maybe there are some verses that would stick out to me. And I ended up reading a lot of Paul's writings, such as Ephesians and Philippians, and a lot of the verses, they really spoke basically exactly to what I was going through. And I was pretty amazed at that at that moment, absolutely every verse I read was like pinpoint, spoke exactly to what I was going through. And I became pretty overwhelmed, even emotionally, because it just felt pretty special. And those verses kind of gave me comfort and a sense that God was with me through that time. And I also, like, I read some Christian books for school, and during that time, a lot of what I read in those books also spoke exactly to what I was going through. So I was pretty amazed at that. And I just felt really overwhelmed with God's presence during that time. Honestly, I don't feel like I've ever felt His presence quite as intensely as I have that time. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that when you're going through difficult circumstances, God is with you, no matter what. I haven't quite felt anything like that before, but it felt pretty special. And I guess like no matter who you are, no matter what age you are, what you're going through, God can speak to you in a lot of different ways. And if you're going through a difficult time, just trust in Him.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really great example of a way that you led in faith, Joe, in trusting in those times that were really hard for you. And even just to piggyback off of Joe, Joe came to youth group and shared that story with us. And it was super encouraging, at least for me as I sat and listened, just in the way that Joe spoke with such conviction and from the way that the Lord has really intersected in his life. And so I personally was very struck by the way that the Lord had spoken to Joe and the way that he had led out in faith during that time. And so I think that's a really great example. And John, would you like to share yours?
Yeah, I wrote a little paragraph on what it was, but I'm not going to copy it word for word. But
Okay.
what I wrote about was that you can feel like anything you do doesn't really have an effect on how people feel, but it has more of an effect than you can think. As going to the different church events here, just showing up can make somebody feel a lot better, and just saying hello to them can make them feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the way that you feel like you led in life too, right? By being kind and showing up and saying hi.
Yeah.
Which I absolutely agree. I feel like I see
Yeah.
that from you all the time, John, especially just walking through, even like second Sunday breakfast when we still had that. That's something that you do a lot that I feel like is really encouraging to me as well.
Mhm.
And Carl, what about you?
Well, I've had a lot of opportunity to see the youth in action, not only on Wednesday nights and other events, but also at mission trips, and that's where, to me, I've seen the examples of the youth really stand out. And it's not so much that it's not just that they're there. It's not just that they gave up time to be there. It's not just that they're working, but I see it a lot in their speech. Particularly when we have the clients, or the folks whose homes we're working on are there, and I get to watch the youth just go right up to them and engage them in conversation. And so it's like a combination of speech and love that they're showing. And we have adults that do that too, but me and some of the other adults are, maybe a distant second to do that. It takes that boldness and the love of the youth to actually just go right out and put themselves out there and talk to the people we meet. And they do the same with the people that are on the mission trip with them, adults and youth alike. So that's been wonderful to see from the youth. They've set very good examples for me in that way on how to just show your love through your speech and your willingness to engage in people.
Yeah, and piggybacking. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you go right ahead, Jules.
Piggybacking off of Carl, working in youth ministry for as long as both of us have, the examples of times that young people have led in these areas is absolutely countless. And I'm sure, Carl, you can agree with that.
Yes.
And I mean, I do what I do because of young people, because I believe in young people, and I have watched the Lord work through them so clearly and so evidently. And I just think it is one of the most encouraging and wonderful things. And so the whole point of this verse and is of this idea that we have been talking about together is this idea that don't look down on people because they're young, because they do lead in these areas of speech and conduct and love and faith. And as we've heard today, we have examples in our own church of ways that our students, our very own students, are stepping out in those ways and are leading in those ways. And we're just really excited to be a part of a church who recognizes that we can sit here confidently and say, the people in our church respect and love our young people and do trust them to lead in a lot of ways. And so we're just really thankful that we are part of a church and a congregation that really does respect young people and that doesn't look down on them because of their age. But yeah, it's just a super cool thing to reiterate that Timothy was trusted as a young person on this huge task. Ephesus is a big church, and there's a lot of false beliefs that are happening. And so he is to go to that church and correct those things, which I'm older than Timothy would have been, and that sounds absolutely terrifying to me. And I'm not sure that I can handle it, but he has trusted Timothy to do that. Paul has, and Paul has been trusted by God. And so in turn, we can see that God has also trusted Timothy to do that, despite his age. And so we just found that really encouraging, and we wanted to share that with the church. And again, just to thank you guys just for the way that you guys respect us and keep us young.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
No. Cool. All right. Well, Carl, would you pray us out then?
Okay, I sure will. Hey, Father God, we thank you so much for what you do to us in our lives. We thank you for all the people that you put in our lives to do your work for us. And today we particularly thank you for all the young people that you put in our lives to be examples of what it means to be a follower of yours. God, I thank you for the witnesses that were given today. And I just, I ask that you be in these young people's lives and all those who are touched by them and their faith. And God, we ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.